I love that. I've had this thing for 15 years.
Oh, man.
It's so much fun. I used to do short films, nothing major in undergrad.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I need to get myself one of those, actually.
They're so much fun.
Oh,
man, look at your setup over there. Look at that thing.
I know.
Now I feel like what is to like to have a camera in front of me. Kay's making me nervous. Kirsten?
Yeah.
Kirsten, okay. Where are you based out of again?
London.
London, that's what it was. All right. Well, you started like that. I don't want to do an intro.
Yeah.
Kirsten, man, I met you here from the very beginning.
Yeah.
You've been a pleasant, wonderful person.
It's been amazing, actually, being here and meeting lots of people, including yourself. It's so much fun, man.
So what brought you here?
So I run a podcast called the Camera Shake Podcast out of London, where I talk to world-leading photographers about how they do what they do. You know, it's all about really getting into the minds of some of the most creative, most technically proficient, and efficient people in the industry, really. And it's not a podcast where we talk about like, you know, these are your camera settings, right? There are other podcasts for that, and that's fantastic. I'm more interested in what makes somebody tick.
What was the catalyst that made you want to create this podcast?
Oh, the pandemic. So before the pandemic, I used to specialize in shooting conferences.
Okay.
Right. And in March 2020, when the pandemic hit and the lockdown started to happen, the whole conference industry basically went into free fall. Literally, the majority of conferences were canceled. Some were delayed until the fall of 2020, but very quickly people started to realize that that wasn't going to happen either. So that got canceled. And I remember there was a day in March 2020 when my phone rang off the hook. It was one day. My phone rang off the hook from morning till night. And every call I took was a cancellation. I was like, oh, yeah, that shoot's canceled. That conference, we can't do it. No, blah, blah, blah. Because a lot of my clients were international corporates. And so they would fly in their sales teams from all over the world. Everywhere from Israel, Africa, North America, Asia, Europe, you know. And it was just impossible to bring people together like that at that time.
Right.
And so it all got canceled. And, you know, I did what most people did. I watched a lot of Netflix. And I did the Marvel movie marathon a couple of times over.
Timeline accurate, or did you?
Well, in order of release.
Okay.
So I had to do it in a number of different ways, because one time I did the movie marathon, straight movies, but then I had to include the TV shows as well at another point. So I did it once with my wife, who's a sci-fi nut, and once with my kids.
That's great. That's great.
But, you know, by the time, this was like, I think at the time it was 26 movies, I believe. You know, I mean, you can only watch TV for so long.
Right.
And, you know, a few weeks into it, I just had enough, you know. And in the UK, the lockdowns were draconian. They're really draconian. We were allowed to leave the house for 45 minutes a day for exercise.
Wow.
And other than that, we were literally locked away, basically, for the lack of a better word. And so there was a point where I really needed to do something creative, you know. And basically every day I was FaceTiming with a friend of mine who was a filmmaker and videographer. And, you know, we talk camera shit, basically. No, we talk like, have you seen this latest lens? Or latest camera ready? Well, you know, geeky stuff. And then I thought, well, you know, why don't we just do a podcast? We had been talking about it about 6 months prior as an idea, but then, you know, life gets in the way, you kick the can down the road and everything.
Of course.
And you never get to it, you know, because there's another project to do, kids, blah, 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 you know, all the rest of it. And I basically said to Nick, my friend, I said, look, man, now might just be the time, because what else are you going to do? You know? And I remember this was a Friday afternoon. And so we're talking about it. I was like, okay, well, yeah, podcast, that sounds good. Okay. And then it's like, well, how do you do it? Like how do you do a podcast? Like, where do podcasts even live, right? How do you get your podcast onto something like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or something? How does the whole thing actually work?
Right.
And you know this thing when you start talking about something and you come up with problems and you come up against obstacles, it's really easy to talk yourself out of a good idea.
Very right. Yeah.
You know? And about 2 hours later, I said, Nick, man, what are you doing on Monday at 4 p.m.? And he goes, well, nothing. I'm stuck in the house. He was single, lived in an apartment, no balcony, no garden, no nothing. So he was literally imprisoned in his own apartment. And he said, well, I'm not doing anything Monday, 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or any time because, you know, I'm stuck here. So it's cool, because Monday, 4 p.m. is when we hit record on the first episode. And we're just going to have to figure it out between now and then. And we're going to call the first episode Done is Better Than Perfect, because we knew it wasn't going to be perfect. In fact, we knew it's probably going to be pretty terrible. I also realized that we just had to get it done.
Right.
And, you know, I figured maybe if we carry on doing it by episode 10, we would have learned a couple of things. Maybe it's going to be a little bit better. By episode 20, it's going to be a lot better. Maybe if we hit 50 episodes, probably going to be a hell of a lot better. And now I'm 240 something episodes in, and I sort of think I know what I'm doing, for the most part. But it's been a trip, man. It's been a trip.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, man. Especially
Unbelievable.
connecting with people and seeing people for who they are. Because, like you mentioned, you're not doing the here's how you do your camera or this and that. With like a lot of podcasts and shows for that.
Yeah.
You're trying to connect with people on a much different level, and I think it's needed in the community. It's definitely needed because not all of us are heard. Not all of us are talking about why we do this. Such as I asked this question, I'll ask it to you. Like, how long has it been since you've done a personal project outside of the podcast?
I'm a really big believer in personal projects, and so I make time for that all
Wonderful.
the time. And I'm in a lucky position that I have opportunities to create things for, let's say, other brands. Can I mention brands on this podcast?
I think so.
Okay, cool. So I create content for a company called Platypod. They make camera accessories,
Nice.
stuff that their stall is just sort of across the aisle from us. But I make little, tutorial things, videos for their podcast, and they really allow me to be as creative as I want. There's no restrictions. They're not telling me what to do. I can come up with some weird and wonderful ways of creating all sorts of different photography. And each one of those videos is a personal project for me because, and this is also sort of it kind of carries on from the podcast. By trade, I'm a portrait photographer ultimately, right? I'd say commercial portrait photographer. There are certain things I know how to do, and there's certain things I really don't know how to do. By my own admission, landscape photography, not my strong suit, right? My landscape photography is pretty terrible. But I've had some amazing landscape photographers on the show, and I've learned a hell of a lot. And overall, just making this podcast every week has just made me a better photographer, but it's also made me a better person, And the hope is that the people that are listening to it have the same, or at least a similar experience. Because it's interesting, even if you're mainly shooting headshots, if you hear somebody talk about aviation photography, I never thought about that. Like, what, you hang out of the side of an airplane? Like, how the hell do you do that? Or things like so I had Pete Souza on the show, for example, Barack Obama's a White House photographer. And talking to him about, what was it like sitting in the Situation Room in the White House?
That's a surreal.
Yeah. Just imagine that famous photo of Barack Obama in the Situation Room surrounded by his generals when the Osama bin Laden raid was going on. Like, don't you want to be able to fly on the wall in that room at that time, at that moment, like when that's happening, right? It's like, and of course, Pete was there taking that shot. I don't know that I could have concentrated on taking a sharp picture in that situation, and that's interesting. Those are the stories that interest me. And those are the things I like to find out about people. And, again, I think there are so many stories in what people do. Having Kevin Painshot on, for example, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer out of Santa Cruz in California, he was photographing the landslides and stuff that happened a couple of years ago, a real natural disaster that had tremendous effects on the community there. And him and his team really enabled communication across the community via their radio station and their online news and the shots, photographs that he took of what was going on. Things like, just reporting on, well, this road is unpassable because it's been a landslide. Nobody go down this road because it's dangerous. Like, and doing that, knowing that your own family home is under danger, and your family's in there, and going out and putting your life and possibly your family's life on the line to serve your community is an amazing story.
The separation that some photographers have to do, whether it's photojournalistic or I met a photographer that photographed the moment when a widow of a military serviceman, when they're handing the flag in the ceremony, that moment when she's receiving it was so touching.
Yeah.
But she said, the thing is, that's my best friend.
Yeah.
Her husband, my husband, they're all best friends, they're all family. And at that moment, I had to separate myself to be able to capture that because I had to do it. It was my duty to do it. And like, it was the moment where she could not have any more tears. She was dry, but the anguish was there, but I had to photograph it. And then once I took that photo, I handed my camera over so I can be the friend.
Yeah.
So journalists, you know,
Yeah.
moments like that, we worry like, holy shit. I think at some times we actually just switch, do our job somehow,
Yeah.
and then snap back.
Yeah, and you know, wall photography is one of those things. I've had, I remember, I had Stefano Torraso on the show, Italian wall photographer. He was embedded with the U.S. Army in Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff. And I remember there's a famous picture he took of a civilian having been shot by a sniper in Iraq, and you know, he was talking about the emotional distress in that moment because you have a choice here. You either help that guy and potentially save his life, or you take that picture and you tell the world what's going on. What do you do? These are impossible situations for any normal person. And I think, you know, it takes a lot to not falter under that much pressure. You know, I have the utmost respect for people who put themselves into those positions, you know, to capture things that are, I think, of historical importance.
Yeah,
you know,
media photojournalistic photographers, they are on a different caliber altogether.
absolutely.
What they can do, and that's why they do what they do.
Yeah.
Because with every photo they take, with every choice, impossible choice they have to take, they live with that.
Yeah.
Because they tell the story, and then of course, then they get the people saying, "Well, why didn't you help them?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm telling you what's going on in the world. It's just
Exactly.
so you try to do both, but that doesn't always play out that way.
Exactly. And you know, you've got the funny thing about like the thing that I love about photography, you know, photography and video and media just in general, is that on one hand you've got these like super serious, you know, really heavy things that are going on, you know, wall photography and all that kind of stuff, you know, documenting history and stuff. But on the other hand, you've got all the fun parts, you know, the hysterically comical and fun projects you could do, you know.
Absolutely.
It's such a wide gamut of possibilities. And you're coming just if you're circling back to personal projects, you know, that's what I love. I love doing things different, you know, learning stuff. I'm in an unbelievably lucky position that by now I've had so many people on the show that if I have a problem with something, there's always somebody I can text or call.
Yeah.
You know, and they're usually among some of the best photographers in the world, which, you know, do you know how it is? Like, there's extreme imposter syndrome kicking in very often.
Yeah.
You know, but at least I have people to talk to.
No, it's good. It's good. And a lot of these people are just regular human beings, and they respect you for treating them like a normal human being and not the celebrity status that they tend to get for the talent that they have and what they put out there. And I think they respect it when you go beyond just a superficial level of what they're for. So,
absolutely.
how did anybody find? I already asked you how they find you on the show, your podcast. Are you on Instagram or anywhere else?
Yeah, so it's quite simple. It's called the Camera Shake podcast. So you go into YouTube and search for Camera Shake, and it's Camera Shake podcast everywhere else, Instagram, even TikTok. Although I don't really do very much on TikTok, I'll be honest. We have a Facebook group as well, Camera Shake podcast. On Twitter, it has to be Shake Camera for some very strange reason.
I'll probably message you. We'll have to get your info, and that way you can send me all the stuff, and I'll put it on the screen. So everybody can follow it. I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, man.
We've been trying. We've been trying all the time, but it's just like it'll happen. So
I tell you what, it's been so much fun being here at Imaging USA. It's my first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's my first time at Imaging. I'm a photography show veteran in London, which is a fantastic show as well. If you ever have the opportunity, come over. It's usually in March, so March the 8th to the 12th this year. But it's a fantastic show. It's not too dissimilar to this. There's lots of stages, lots of education going on, loads of people there.
That's great.
It's amazing. So it's been amazing being here, meeting people like yourself.
Same.
Man, you definitely have to come on my show. Absolutely no question about that.
Okay, I'll definitely do it.
You know, and man, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Phenomenal. Thank you.
Dude.
I appreciate it.